Welcome back, friends. I hope that you have enjoyed both the sermons as well as the postscriptive reflections on the sermons of this Lenten series. It's been a very difficult, cumbersome season, not only liturgically, but of course, as we all know, geopolitically, right? We live in this state of uncertainty, concern, pain, disappointment. And I think that though it may not have been scripted as such, it certainly put us in that kind of Lenten mode where we're really trying to ground ourselves and reconsider perhaps some of the things that we had brought with us prior to the season of Lent into the season that we're asked to let go of now. This last Sunday, I finished off my structured series with a focus on mental health. Depression specifically. And the reason I did so is because many of us go through our days and are unsure of how to articulate what it is we're having to carry. Now, I know a lot of us do carry more than we share, and it shows sometimes, but some of us have become outright masters at concealment. Not because we're trying to conceal or hide, but we don't feel that it's appropriate to just be honest about where we're at, if it's melancholic or depressive. But as I suggested in my sermon on Sunday, the studies show that the vast majority of human beings, especially those who are younger, are dealing consistently with high levels of depression and major depressive episodes every single year. There are no signs that that's slowing down. And when you factor in some of the pressures economically, socially, culturally that we're dealing with, it makes sense. I also found it rewarding to have these two psychologists who had identified some important maybe reframes for us as we consider our role as a community of faith. Of course, I mentioned Bruce Perry, and I know many of you are familiar with his work. I loved the way that he turned the question of what's wrong with me, which many of us have asked and maybe even continue to ask. He changed it to what happened to me. It acknowledges that we have all kind of been through it. Things have happened, words have been said, we've had to struggle, and as a result, we are how we are, and we carry some of that past with us. And so one of the helpful strategies is to not identify with what we're experiencing, but say, hey, something happened to produce this. That way we don't maybe catalyze the production of shame and guilt that often happens when we ask the question, what's wrong with me? Why is this happening? Secondly, it's important to realize that there are structural factors. The material conditions of our life, the demands placed on us, very often produce selves, subjects walking around in the world that are overtaxed. And I don't mean that financially. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking taxed as in like the emotional burden that we're forced to bear on a daily basis and physical burden depending on the nature of our work. We are put into situations that unfortunately lead to greater inflammation throughout our bodies, including our brain. That kind of hyperactivity is not sustainable. And we see it in the burnout that more and more people are dealing with. So, as I recommended on Sunday, we do have a role to play in helping people to heal from the consequences of these major depressive episodes. A, we are able to help cultivate an understanding of why we got here, but B, we're able to radically affirm who people are, so they're not constantly trying to judge themselves and aspire to be other than who they are and how they are. We also can encourage people to take pauses. It's easier said than done, especially if you're not in a situation that really lets you pause. Maybe you have a lot of responsibilities right now. I know I do. And it can be very hard. The practice of Sabbath, holy pauses, it doesn't have to be a whole day, but just taking those minutes, those moments, those periods of time that you have and not trying to run to the next thing. Take in that deep breath. Sit there and hear that still small voice that says you are enough, that you are beloved, and that you're welcomed in this space, in this community. And then, of course, thirdly, it's about fostering a connection to something bigger than ourselves, something other than ourselves. We can name that differently. It can be our connection to this community, our connection to that great context of our community that we call God. It can be this beautiful, rich faith tradition with many different branches that we can walk out on and explore. We have an embarrassment of riches here. And when you become a part of this community, you're invited to partake, to join in. That's part of the beauty of community. Those are three major contributions that we have made as a community of faith and can continue to make. I believe we're called to do so. And while it doesn't immediately or effectively end the depression that we're dealing with, it helps us to provide perhaps a balm or kind of a healing salve for what we all are affected by in today's time and place. So I hope you enjoyed that meditation and that you're able to take something from it. And I look forward to seeing you next week as we kind of ramp up and make the transition into Holy Week. Of course, this Sunday's Palm Sunday, and you know what Sunday comes after that, but we have a road to walk before we get there. So I look forward to seeing you then. Have a great week.